Senator Cornyn's next.
Commissioner, isn't it true that a tax credit or a tax subsidy, dollar for dollar, adds to federal expenditures, and in the case of a $31 trillion debt, it adds to the debt? In other words, tax credits are just another way for the federal government to spend money, correct?
I think technically it's like an outlay or a spend with respect to measuring the deficit.
Thanks, John.
We talked a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act. In addition to throwing gasoline on the fire of inflation with $700 billion of additional spending and added to the debt, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, this partisan bill, this was voted on exclusively by our friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, signed into law by the president. It lavishes rich subsidies for electric vehicles, up to $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles. And I want to point out that contrary to the original estimate about how much this would actually cost in terms of outlays, it was originally advertised as being a $30 billion expenditure, and the truth is it looks like it's going to be closer to $200 billion, 6.5 times higher than advertised. The president, as you know, has said by 2032 he wants to, by his magic wand, say that 2/3 of all the vehicles being built will be electric vehicles, even though we now have 280 million cars on the road, and almost all, except 2 or 3 or 4%, are internal combustion engines. Added to that, we know that about 60% of electricity that would be needed to charge those batteries comes from fossil fuels. Only about 22% of electricity is generated by renewables. And we know that basically this mandate and this expenditure, this lavish expenditure for the rich, would do virtually nothing to reduce carbon emissions. But I want to ask you about the supply chain. 77% of the batteries made in the world are made by China. We know they're on a path to increase their capacity to build electric batteries by 7-fold by 2027. Is there any way that this mandate President Biden has ordered with the stroke of his pen, is there any way that it will do anything except increase the sale of Chinese-made batteries here in the United States?
Senator, I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that what the IRS responsibilities are to issue regulations and guidance for how these credits will be evaluated and who will be eligible for them based on a very intricate array of requirements that are in place. What we are doing now is issuing on a path to issue regulations for comment. And so the questions that you're raising, the tensions, the policy tensions that you're raising, will be fleshed out in the comments that we receive on the regulations. And then I will be able to come back and sit in this chair and be more illuminating in terms of what those comments are and talk to you about what those tensions are. And
you will agree with me that those regulations are going to have to be consistent with what is in the law?
Absolutely.
Okay. And actually, the Inflation Reduction Act, misnamed, I might add, actually provides a smorgasbord of credits for electric vehicles. For example, there's a $4,000 credit for used electric vehicles. That's Section 25E. There's a $40,000 tax credit for commercial electric vehicles. That's Section 45W. Yep. And then there's a tax credit for fuel cell cars, which is Section 30B. Do you know if these other credits have the same critical mineral and battery sourcing requirements as the $7,500 EV credit?
Senator, I don't know that at my fingertips, but I can certainly provide you information on that.
I appreciate that, because it appears to me that the American taxpayer will be subsidizing the purchase of Chinese-made commercial and used electric vehicles by virtue of these tax credits. So we'd appreciate your getting back to us with that information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague. We're going to go to Senator Johnson, but I just want to say, as the lead author of this package of more than $200 billion in clean energy tax credits, we felt very strongly about the point Senator Cornyn's talking about batteries being made in China. And the legislation, and this was at my direction, provides incentives for batteries made in the United States. And it was something we worked on for some time.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just respond briefly, it's not possible to meet that requirement due to this constraint on supply chain and battery manufacturing. So it's either going to subsidize Chinese-made batteries or it's an illusory promise.
Plenty of supply chain issues. The fact is, and I'm going to go to Senator Johnson, the point, and it's something I happen to agree with about batteries being made in China, was something that we took direct action to deal with when we were marking up that legislation. We want batteries made in the United States. We pushed to make that possible with the incentives. Senator Johnson. Excuse me, Senator.
Yeah, I didn't think I was.
I said my
I
colleague.
appreciate it, but I realize that.
I'm sorry for getting out of order. Senator